A 4-liter flat-six engine that can scream past 9,000 RPM. A car that once carried a six-figure price tag and a legendary badge. And a manufacturer that looked at all of it and said, "Not our problem anymore." Why would Porsche, a company built on precision engineering and customer loyalty, turn its back on one of its own halo cars? Today we're digging into the strange, tangled story of a repossessed 911 GT3 RS, the YouTuber who bought it anyway, and the corporate paper trail that explains exactly why Porsche walked away. If you know anything about the collector car market, you know that a 991 generation Porsche 911 GT3 RS is not supposed to be cheap. These are naturally aspirated, track-honed machines that Porsche builds in limited numbers, and they typically hold their value better than almost anything else on four wheels. Buyers don't flip them for pennies. They wait years on allocation lists just to get one. So when a 991.1 GT3 RS turned up at auction for roughly £87,000, around $116,000 at the time, something clearly wasn't right. That's a steep discount for a car that, in healthy condition, regularly changes hands for well over double that figure. The buyer was Matt Armstrong, a British automotive YouTuber with a reputation for chasing exactly these kinds of impossible projects. Armstrong has built his channel around rescuing supposedly unfixable exotics. He'd previously taken on a broken Bugatti Veyron rather than pay the manufacturer's eye-watering official service bill. A busted GT3 RS was right in his wheelhouse. When the car arrived at his workshop, the confusion only deepened. Cosmetically, it looked almost new. The paint was clean, the paint protection film intact, no signs of track scrapes or collision repair. But turn the key, and nothing happened. No crank, no dashboard lights, no sign of life at all. A car that looked showroom fresh was, mechanically, completely dead. The real story wasn't under the hood, at least not at first. It was in the documentation. Digging into the car's history, Armstrong discovered that Porsche's own dealer network had refused to touch it. The warranty had been voided, and the car had effectively been flagged in the manufacturer's system. That's an unusual position for Porsche to take. This generation of GT3 RS was covered by an extended factory program addressing a well-documented mechanical weak point in its valvetrain. Specifically, premature were between the camshafts and the small rocker-style components called finger followers that open and close the intake and exhaust valves. When that wear starts, it sheds metal debris into the oil, which can cascade into serious engine damage. Porsche's own extended warranty coverage was built to specifically catch cases like this and cover them with a replacement engine, free of charge to the owner. So why wasn't this car covered? According to Armstrong's own account of events, the answer came down to a mismatch between the physical wear inside the engine and the mileage showing on the odometer. When Porsche's technicians ran their diagnostic checks, the data didn't add up. The wear pattern on the internals suggested the engine had done significantly more work than the dashboard indicated. Porsche's technicians reportedly suspected the car had been fitted with a mileage blocker, a device that interferes with the odometer signal so the displayed mileage stops climbing, even while the car continues to be driven. That single discrepancy changed everything. A warranty claim depends on trust in the vehicle's history. If the mileage can't be verified, a manufacturer has no reliable way to know whether a defect was caused by a known design flaw or by everyday wear and tear that simply wasn't being logged. Rather than gamble on an unverifiable claim, Porsche denied it outright, and the dealership handed back a repair estimate that reportedly ran into the tens of thousands of dollars, an amount the previous owner was apparently unwilling or unable to pay. Left with a car that didn't run and a bill he had no intention of covering, the original owner walked away. Payments on the vehicle's finance agreement stopped soon after, and the lender eventually stepped in to repossess it. That is how a car that should have been one of the most desirable variants of the modern 911 lineup ended up sitting, partially disassembled, in a bank's inventory, and eventually at auction. To put the discount in perspective, it helps to understand what a healthy example of this car is worth. The 991.1 generation GT3 RS, built between 2015 and roughly 2019, is widely regarded by enthusiasts as one of the last truly analog expressions of Porsche's motorsport-derived engineering before hybrid assistance and heavier turbocharged setups started creeping into the lineup. Clean, low-mileage examples with a full service history routinely trade for well north of $200,000 in the current collector market. A car selling for roughly half that isn't a bargain. It's a warning sign, and anyone with real experience in this segment would have known it immediately. Here's where the story gets interesting, because what Armstrong found when he actually opened the car up didn't fully match the nightmare scenario everyone was expecting. The first discoveries were almost comical in how basic they were. Underneath the car, the oil sump plug was loose, not damaged, not stripped, just loose enough to spin freely by hand. The engine had no coolant in it at all. And inside the cabin, sitting loose on the passenger seat, was the car's fuel pump fuse, pulled out and never put back. That last detail matters more than it sounds. Without that fuse in place, the fuel pump simply won't run, and the engine won't start no matter what else is wrong with it. In other words, part of the reason this car looked dead wasn't a catastrophic mechanical failure at all. It was a fuse sitting in the wrong spot. The likely explanation, according to Armstrong, was straightforward. Once the dealership's investigation flagged the mileage discrepancy and the warranty claim was killed, there was no longer a paying customer attached to the repair. The technicians who'd already begun stripping the car down for inspection had no incentive to finish the job or reassemble it properly. Parts got tossed back in loosely, fluids weren't topped up, and the car was pushed out of the service bay in whatever state it happened to be in. Pulling the engine out entirely, a job that takes a trained team the better part of several days on a car like this, Armstrong's crew braced for the worst. Instead, they found something more nuanced. The cylinder bores and pistons were in good shape, with no evidence of catastrophic heat damage or seizure. But deeper in the valve train, the story was different. Worn camshaft lobes that had lost their factory profile, and several of the finger followers were missing from their mounting positions entirely, having broken free and dropped into the lower half of the engine. That pattern lines up precisely with the known valve train weakness this generation of GT3 RS is known for. It also lines up with Porsche's stated reason for denying the claim, significant valve train wear on a car whose recorded mileage didn't seem to justify it. It's also worth understanding why this particular engine has such a reputation among enthusiasts and independent specialists in the first place. The naturally aspirated 4-liter flat-six used in this generation of GT3 and GT3 RS models is derived from Porsche's motorsport program, sharing significant architecture with engines built for GT racing. That heritage is exactly why it can rev as high as it does and why it produces the kind of linear, high-strung power delivery that separates it from more mainstream turbocharged 911 variants. But that same motorsport-bred design also runs tighter tolerances and higher valve train speeds than a typical road car engine, which leaves less margin for error if a component like a finger follower starts to wear unevenly. It's a trade-off between outright performance and long-term durability that owners of high-strung engines from any manufacturer eventually have to reckon with. It's worth pausing here to explain why a mileage blocker is such a serious issue, both mechanically and legally. Modern performance cars like the GT3 RS aren't just monitored by a single odometer reading. They log usage data across multiple onboard control units, engine hours, throttle events, service intervals, and diagnostic histories that are meant to independently corroborate one another. When a physical mileage-limiting device is spliced into the wiring to freeze the dashboard's number, it can desynchronize the visible odometer from those other internal logs. Porsche's factory diagnostic software is specifically built to catch exactly that kind of inconsistency, comparing recorded engine runtime against displayed distance and flagging anything that doesn't line up. The financial incentive for tampering with an odometer is obvious. High-performance and limited-run cars like the GT3 RS command a premium partly because of low, verifiable mileage. Every extra mile on the clock can shave real money off the resale price. For an owner chasing maximum resale value, disabling the odometer might look, on paper, like a way to protect an investment. In most jurisdictions, though, deliberately tampering with a vehicle's odometer to misrepresent its mileage is illegal, and it strips away exactly the kind of transparency that a manufacturer's warranty depends on. That's really the crux of why this story isn't as simple as evil car company abandons its customer. If Porsche's technicians genuinely found evidence that the car's true usage had been concealed, then denying the warranty wasn't a matter of corporate stinginess, it was standing behind a policy that only works if the underlying data can be trusted. A manufacturer that pays out on claims regardless of tampered records isn't protecting customers. It's rewarding the exact behavior that hurts the resale market for everyone else. Whatever the rights and wrongs of the warranty decision, Armstrong wasn't interested in relitigating it. He wanted to see if the engine could be saved outright. The rebuild followed a familiar but painstaking path. Every oil gallery and passage in the block had to be thoroughly cleaned to remove metal debris left behind by the worn components. A single stray fragment could destroy freshly fitted parts within minutes of the engine's first start. New camshafts and updated finger followers went in, designed to correct the original design's known weak point. The valve train had to be re-shimmed and the engine timing carefully reset by hand, without the specialized factory tooling a Porsche dealership would normally use for the job. According to Armstrong's own figures, the parts needed to get the engine running again cost in the region of £5,500, a little over $7,000, a fraction of the original five-figure repair estimate he'd walked away from. Later in the process, he reportedly found a separate issue entirely unrelated to the valve train where the cam variators on one bank appeared to have been installed incorrectly during some earlier service work, which was throwing off the engine's timing. Once that was corrected, the car finally ran cleanly, with no warning lights and stable readings across the board. A rebuilt engine is only proven once it's actually been run under real load, and Armstrong didn't take the safe route. After confirming solid oil pressure and consistent cooling on the workbench, the car went through a low-speed shakedown before being pushed harder, eventually taken out to demonstrate that the flat six could rev cleanly and hold together under sustained, high RPM driving, the exact condition that had destroyed the original valve train components in the first place. The engine held. No warning lights, no drop in oil pressure, no return of the telltale ticking noise that had signaled the original failure. For a car that had been sitting dead in a repossession lot only months earlier, it was a genuinely impressive result, achieved largely outside the dealership system that had declared the car not worth fixing. Here's the part of the story that complicates the simple underdog beats the corporation narrative. Armstrong didn't just want a running car. He wanted Porsche to formally reinstate factory backing on it, which would meaningfully affect its resale value. To make that case, the car reportedly went through an extensive, roughly 111-point inspection carried out by a Porsche technician, an attempt to demonstrate that the rebuild met the manufacturer's own standards closely enough to justify restoring some level of official coverage. The results were reportedly mixed, broadly positive on the mechanical work itself, but not sufficient on their own to immediately reinstate a full factory warranty, with a handful of remaining concerns still on the table. That outcome is arguably the most honest part of the whole saga. It shows that Porsche wasn't simply digging in out of stubbornness. The manufacturer was willing to reevaluate the car on its actual condition, but a home rebuild, however skillfully executed, doesn't automatically clear the same bar as factory-certified work. So who comes out looking bad here? Porsche, for denying warranty coverage on a car with a documented design flaw? Or the previous owner, who may have used a mileage blocker to protect resale value, and then abandoned the car rather than pay for the consequences? The honest answer is that both threads are true at once. Porsche's engineers built a valve train component that had a known failure pattern in this generation of GT3 RS, serious enough that the company extended factory coverage specifically to address it. That's a legitimate criticism of the original engineering. At the same time, a manufacturer's warranty is built on a foundation of trust in a car's recorded history. If that trust is broken, deliberately or not, a manufacturer has every right to decline a claim it can no longer verify. It's also worth noting that Armstrong's run-ins with manufacturer policy on troubled cars aren't limited to this one Porsche. He's since described similar friction with Ferrari over a 296 GTB he was working on, claiming he was blocked from ordering certain parts directly and that official repair channels became harder to access after he took the car outside the dealership network. Manufacturers of ultra-high-performance cars increasingly maintain internal flags, sometimes informally described as blacklists, tied to a vehicle's VIN once a warranty dispute, mileage discrepancy, or unauthorized repair history is logged against it. That kind of gatekeeping is defended by automakers as a way to protect brand standards and safety, but it also means an owner's relationship with a manufacturer can sour permanently over a single disputed claim, regardless of how the underlying mechanical issue is eventually resolved. For anyone shopping in the used exotic car market, the real lesson isn't about Porsche specifically. It's about how fragile a six-figure asset's value can be when its paperwork doesn't match its mechanical reality. A single gap in a documented service history, one questionable diagnostic flag, or a manufacturer's decision to blacklist a VIN can turn a car worth hundreds of thousands of dollars into something a bank is forced to repossess and sell at a steep discount. Matt Armstrong didn't wait for Porsche to change its mind. He sourced the parts, put in the labor, and brought a dead Halo car back to life on his own terms, even if the manufacturer wasn't ready to fully vouch for it afterward. Whether you see that as a triumph over corporate red tape or a cautionary tale about buying a car nobody else wanted, one thing is clear. In the world of exotic cars, the story printed on the odometer can matter just as much as the engine underneath it. Stories like this one tend to spread fast in car enthusiast communities because they touch on something bigger than one YouTuber's garage project. They speak to a growing tension between traditional manufacturer control and a generation of independent mechanics, tuners, and content creators who are increasingly willing and able to take on repairs that dealerships either won't touch or will only perform at a steep premium. There's a legitimate argument on both sides. Manufacturers point out that cars like a 9,000 RPM naturally aspirated flat-six are not simple machines, and that improper reassembly by anyone without factory training and factory tooling carries real safety risk, both for the person behind the wheel and for anyone sharing the road or the racetrack with them. That's part of why Porsche's technicians didn't simply rubber stamp Armstrong's finished rebuild after the fact. A car passing a visual and functional check is not the same as a car meeting every one of a manufacturer's internal engineering tolerances. On the other hand, independent specialists and enthusiast mechanics increasingly have access to diagnostic tools, factory-spec replacement parts, and shared technical knowledge that used to be exclusively available inside dealership walls. That shift has made it possible for someone like Armstrong to take on a job that would have been unthinkable for a private individual a decade ago, and to do it for a fraction of what an official repair bill would have cost, assuming the manufacturer had even been willing to perform one in the first place. What this story ultimately demonstrates is that neither side is entirely villain or hero. Porsche built a genuinely flawed component into a car that its most passionate customers paid a premium for, and it extended a warranty program to make that right. A program this car didn't ultimately qualify for once questions arose about the accuracy of its recorded history. The original owner may have made a costly and possibly illegal decision to interfere with that history, whether to protect resale value or for some other reason that never became public. And Armstrong, whatever his motivations for buying a car nobody else wanted, put in the technical work to prove the engine wasn't beyond saving, even without a factory badge of approval waiting at the end of it. Would you take the risk on a car a manufacturer refuses to back? Let us know what you think, and if you enjoyed this one, make sure you're subscribed for the next deep dive.